You wake to the sound of static. It's day 847 aboard the Eternal Vigilance, and Senior Vox Operator Matthias Krent, that's you, in this moment, settles into the worn leather chair that has become your entire world. The static hisses through the Voxcasters like the dying breath of a mortally wounded beast, a sound that once meant nothing more than empty channels. Now, it's the only voice the void has left to offer. Your fingers move across the console with practiced precision, muscle memory guiding you through frequency sweeps that have become as routine as prayer. Channel 1, the priority Imperial command frequency, offers nothing but the electronic whisper of distant radiation. Channel 15, reserved for supply requests and logistics coordination, greets you with the same hollow silence that has defined your existence for over 2 years. The Eternal Vigilance stretches around you like a cathedral of metal and desperation, her corridors designed to house 50,000 souls in service to the God Emperor. You remember when those passages hummed with purpose, the rhythmic clank of thousands of boots in synchronized march, the distant murmur of prayer from the ship's countless shrines, the reassuring growl of perfectly calibrated engines pushing through the void with divine certainty. Now you hear your own heartbeat. The silence isn't just absence, it's presence. It has weight. It presses against your eardrums like deep ocean water, threatening to crush something vital inside your skull. When 50,000 people suddenly make no sound, the quiet becomes a living thing, stalking the ship's arteries with predatory intent. You lean forward, adjusting the gain on the long-range receivers, chasing ghosts in the electromagnetic spectrum. Your last successful transmission was a routine supply request filed 847 days ago, a simple request for protein rations, water purification tablets, and replacement parts for the ship's atmospheric processors. Standard bureaucracy for a routine patrol mission that should have lasted 6 months. The response never came. At first, you assumed it was interference. The Eternal Vigilance was operating near the Ghoul Stars, where space itself sometimes seems to swallow communications like a hungry mouth. Technical difficulties were expected. Command would respond within the week, perhaps with new orders or an explanation for the delay. The week became a month. The month became a year. Now, as you watch the chronometer tick past day 847, a terrible understanding settles in your chest like ice crystallizing in your veins. You're not just lost. You're not even forgotten. You're erased. The thought hits you as you scan the emergency frequencies, the same channels that should carry distress signals from other Imperial vessels, merchant ships, even the occasional Xenos transmission that intelligence uses to track enemy movements. Nothing. Static on every channel, as if the universe itself has gone silent, leaving the Eternal Vigilance alone in an ocean of electromagnetic death. You remember the beginning, when hope still seemed reasonable. Captain Mordian Cross had addressed the crew over the ship's Vox network, his voice carrying the steady authority that had guided them through a dozen successful campaigns. "We are temporarily out of contact with command," he had announced, the words echoing through every corridor and hab block. "But we are servants of the Emperor, and we shall maintain our duty regardless of communication status." The crew had responded with proper enthusiasm, their voices joining in the traditional response. "The Emperor protects." 50,000 throats declaring faith in unison, the sound vibrating through the ship's hull like a prayer made manifest. Now when you look around the bridge, you count 7 souls. 7 out of 50,000. The bridge itself tells the story of gradual decay. Control stations that once hummed with constant activity now stand dark, their screens reflecting nothing but the occasional flicker of emergency lighting. The air recyclers wheeze with mechanical exhaustion, fighting to process atmosphere for a population that barely exists. You've learned to recognize the sound of systems designed for multitudes trying to serve handfuls. It's like listening to a dying animal's labored breathing. Your fingers pause over the transmission controls as footsteps echo from the bridge's main entrance. Chief Medici Valentina Hess enters, her white coat bearing stains that weren't there yesterday. Behind her, Chief Engineer Thaddeus Coram follows, his usually pristine uniform wrinkled and reeking of lubricants and something else, something organic and unpleasant. Any word from command? Valentina asks, though you all know the answer. This has become ritual, a daily affirmation of their collective abandonment. Nothing, Chief Medici, you respond, the words tasting like ash. All channels remain silent. Thaddeus settles into one of the empty command chairs, metal creaking under his weight. You notice how thin he's become, how his uniform hangs loose around a frame that once filled it with engineering pride. Water recycling is operating at 60% efficiency, he reports to no one in particular. Atmospheric processing is holding steady, but we're burning through power reserves faster than the reactors can compensate. And the protein reserves. Valentina's question carries weight beyond mere logistics. Thaddeus is quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the main view screen's display of endless void. When he speaks, his voice carries the careful precision of a man who has done calculations he wishes he hadn't. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we implement stricter rationing. Stricter than half rations. Quarter rations or... The word hangs in the air like a blade suspended over your collective necks. Valentina's medical training has taught her to think in terms of biological necessity, caloric requirements, and survival mathematics. Thaddeus's engineering mind approaches problems with systematic logic, breaking down complex challenges into manageable solutions. Or, you hear yourself ask, though part of you already knows what he's going to say. Thaddeus looks directly at you, his eyes holding the flat expression of a man who has crossed a line he didn't know existed. There are other sources of protein aboard this ship. We just haven't been thinking about them correctly. The static from your Vox console suddenly seems louder, more insistent. You realize it's not static you're hearing. It's the sound of your own blood rushing through your ears, carrying terror to every cell in your body. Valentina speaks first, her medical training providing the clinical detachment necessary to voice the unthinkable. We have approximately 47,000 crew members currently in cold storage. The ship's morgue systems have kept the bodies in perfect preservation. Bodies, Thaddeus adds, his engineering precision making the word sound like a technical specification. That represent roughly 18 months of protein requirements for our current population. You want to object, to invoke the Emperor's protection, to remind them that you are servants of the Imperium, not scavengers feeding on the dead. But the words stick in your throat like bone fragments because your rational mind, the part trained in Imperial Navy logistics and resource management, is already calculating the mathematics of survival. 47,000 bodies, 7 living souls, 18 months of protein. The numbers make horrible sense. From your Vox console, static continues its electronic prayer to a universe that no longer listens. You realize that somewhere during this conversation, you stopped scanning for rescue signals and started scanning for justification. The void outside the Eternal Vigilance stretches infinite and empty, offering no salvation except what you can take from yourselves. The Emperor protects, you whisper, the words automatically falling from your lips. But as you look around the bridge, at Valentina's haunted eyes, at Thaddeus's grim determination, at the empty stations that once buzzed with purposeful activity, you realize that protection and survival might not mean the same thing. The static grows louder, and for the first time in 847 days, you begin to hope you never receive a response. 9 days later, you are no longer Matthias Krent, the Vox operator who still believed in rescue. You are Matthias Krent, who attended his first resource allocation meeting this morning, where Chief Medici Valentina opened a leather-bound ledger and began reading names aloud like a prayer service for the damned. The Eternal Vigilance breathes differently now. You've noticed it in the way the air recyclers cycle, longer pauses between breaths, as if the ship itself is conserving energy for some terrible purpose. The corridors that once carried the righteous thunder of 50,000 servants of the Emperor now echo with the hollow footsteps of 7 people playing house in a mausoleum. But you've begun to understand something that chills you more than the gradually cooling corridors. The ship isn't dying, it's adapting. Think of the Eternal Vigilance as you would any living organism, a vast metallic beast drifting through the void, its hull like skin, its corridors like arteries, its thousands of crew members like blood cells carrying oxygen and purpose throughout its massive frame. When a creature is cut off from external food sources, when starvation begins to set in, the body doesn't simply shut down. It begins to consume itself. First, it burns through stored fat, the non-essential reserves that evolution has provided for exactly this purpose. For the Eternal Vigilance, this meant the cached supplies, the emergency rations tucked away in forgotten storage compartments, the protein bars that Chief Medici Valentina distributed with increasingly clinical precision. But when the stored fat is gone, the body turns to muscle. It cannibalizes its own strength to fuel basic functions. It prioritizes vital organs over limbs, consciousness over physical power. The organism survives by becoming less than it was, sacrificing pieces of itself in an increasingly desperate attempt to keep the essential core alive. The Eternal Vigilance has entered this phase. You discover this during your shift change, when you make your daily pilgrimage through the ship's major sectors. What once required rapid transit through crowded passages now becomes a leisurely walk through spaces that seem to grow larger each day. Hab blocks designed for thousands house handfuls. Mess halls capable of feeding entire regiments serve meals to individuals who sit at different tables, separated by gulfs of empty chairs and unspoken horror. The ship system displays tell the story in numbers that would be bureaucratic if they weren't so terrifying. Atmospheric processing has reduced output by 87%. Power distribution has been rerouted from non-essential systems, entertainment centers, training facilities, recreational areas, to support basic life functions. Waste management systems designed for a population approaching a small city now process the biological output of a single squad. But the most telling change is in the ship's official documentation. You first notice it when reviewing the daily duty rosters that still post automatically to your station. Where once these documents carried headers like Daily Personnel Assignment 49,847 Active Crew, they now read Resource Allocation Schedule Active Personnel 7. Resource allocation, not duty assignment, not personnel management, resource allocation. The language itself has begun to evolve, developing euphemisms that allow the mind to process concepts too horrible for direct acknowledgement. Chief Engineer Thaddeus has begun filing reports that reference biological material inventory and protein resource management. Chief Medici Valentina's medical logs now contain entries about organic asset preservation and nutritional sustainability protocols. You realize they're talking about corpses. 47,000 corpses. Bodies of crew members who died during the ship's mysterious passage through whatever hell has claimed them, now cataloged not as fallen servants of the Emperor, but as raw materials for an impossible equation of survival. The breakthrough, if you can call it that, comes during a conversation between Valentina and Thaddeus that you overhear while performing routine maintenance on the bridge's communication array. They don't realize you're listening, hunched behind an open panel with tools that no longer serve any real purpose except the psychological comfort of routine. The preservation systems in Morgue Bay 17 are operating at optimal efficiency, Valentina reports, her voice carrying the clinical detachment of a Medici discussing standard patient care. Temperature maintained at -18 degrees Celsius, with stable atmospheric sealing to prevent decomposition. How many bodies? Thaddeus asks. 4,237, all preserved within acceptable parameters for processing. Processing, another euphemism to add to the growing collection. And the kitchen facilities, Thaddeus continues. Can they handle the volume? You freeze, your wrench slipping from nerveless fingers to clatter against the deck plating. The sound echoes through the bridge like a gunshot, and both officers turn toward your maintenance station. For a moment, the three of you stare at each other across a gulf of unspoken understanding. Valentina breaks the silence first. Krent, she says, your surname carrying the weight of confession. Perhaps you should join this conversation. You emerge from behind the panel, tools forgotten, to face two people who have become something other than what they were when you first met them. Valentina's medical training has provided her with the intellectual framework to approach cannibalism as a clinical problem. Thaddeus's engineering background allows him to view human bodies as biological machines that can be repurposed for different functions. We're not talking about murder, Valentina says, as if reading your thoughts. These people are already dead. They died serving the Emperor, and now they can serve him again by keeping his surviving servants alive. The logic is impeccable. The rationalization is complete. The dissent is absolute. Thaddeus produces a data slate from his uniform pocket, its screen displaying what appears to be a routine engineering schematic. But as you look closer, you realize you're viewing modification plans for the ship's kitchen facilities. Larger preparation areas, enhanced cutting equipment, improved refrigeration systems. The Emperor demands survival, Thaddeus says, his voice carrying the same tone he once used to discuss plasma conduit maintenance. Any action that serves survival serves the Emperor. Any hesitation that threatens survival is heresy against his will. You find yourself nodding, though part of your mind screams in horror at the gesture. The nod is automatic, a lifetime of Imperial conditioning responding to theological logic with programmed agreement. The Emperor protects. The Emperor provides. The Emperor demands that his servants survive to continue serving. If survival requires eating the dead, then eating the dead becomes a holy sacrament. The first body comes from Morgue Bay 17 3 days later. Rating 3rd class Helena Voss, age 23, killed during an atmospheric breach that claimed her entire maintenance team. She has been preserved in the ship's morgue systems for 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Her service record indicates exemplary performance, with commendations for technical skill and devotion to duty. She weighs approximately 60 kilograms. Chief Medici Valentina performs the initial examination with medical precision, her hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone conducting a routine autopsy. Chief Engineer Thaddeus assists, his technical knowledge proving valuable in the methodical dismantling of what was once a human being. You watch from the kitchen's preparation area, where industrial cutting equipment has been repurposed for tasks its original designers never imagined. The sound of machinery processing organic matter fills the air, wet, mechanical sounds that will haunt your dreams for whatever remains of your life. The meat is blessed before consumption. Prayers are said. Incense burns from portable censers, filling the room with the sacred smoke of devotion. Chief Medici Valentina speaks the words of the Imperial Creed while Chief Engineer Thaddeus intones the litany of sanctification. In the Emperor's name, we partake of this sacrifice. In his glory, we find strength to continue our service. In his wisdom, we understand that all things serve his will, even in death. The first bite tastes like pork. The second tastes like shame. By the third, you've stopped tasting anything at all. That night, you return to your Vox station and resume scanning frequencies for rescue signals. The static greets you like an old friend, its electronic whisper now sounding less like emptiness and more like absolution. You realize you're no longer scanning for salvation from outside the ship. You're scanning for forgiveness from a universe that has stopped listening. But the Eternal Vigilance continues its journey through the void, its hull intact, its essential systems functioning, its 7 remaining crew members fed and able to continue their duties. The ship has successfully transitioned from external sustenance to internal consumption. The organism survives by eating itself. And in the grim darkness of the far future, Survival itself has become a form of prayer. 26 days after the first meal, you are no longer the Vox operator who watched others make terrible decisions. You are Sister Superior Cassandra of the Order of the Blessed Chalice, and today you are holding a lottery to determine which of your battle sisters will have the honor of feeding their companions. The chapel aboard the Eternal Vigilance was never grand by Imperial standards, a modest space designed to serve the spiritual needs of a warship's crew, not the soaring majesty of a cathedral. But in the growing emptiness of the ship, it has become something more intimate, more terrible. Where once 100 voices might have joined in prayer, now 6 women kneel before the Emperor's shrine, their voices barely filling the space designed for so many more. 5 battle sisters of the Adepta Sororitas remain from the original contingent of 20 who began this voyage. Sister Agatha, barely 19, and still carrying the fervent faith of a novice. Sister Beatrice, a veteran of 3 campaigns against the heretical cults of the Tertius sector. Sister Constantia, whose skill with Medici training has made her invaluable to the ship's dwindling population. Sister Dominica, an expert in ship-to-ship combat whose skills have become irrelevant in the emptiness of space. And Sister Evangeline, whose duty as the Order's chronicler requires her to document everything, even this. And you, their superior, who must make decisions that no amount of training in the Schola Progenium could have prepared you for. The discussion began 3 days ago, when Chief Medici Valentina approached you with a request that sounded reasonable until you understood its true meaning. The ship's surviving crew had exhausted the readily available bodies from the morgue systems. The next phase of resource allocation would require contributions from the living population. But we cannot simply select people for processing, Valentina had explained, her medical training providing clinical distance from the horror of her words. There must be volunteers, people who choose to serve the Emperor through the ultimate sacrifice. And who better to volunteer than the Adepta Sororitas? Who better to demonstrate the ultimate expression of faith than those who had already devoted their lives to the Emperor's service? The logic was unassailable. The request was reasonable. The outcome was inevitable. Now you kneel before the shrine, 6 pieces of parchment in a brass chalice that once held blessed wine during communion services. Each piece bears a name written in your own hand, 5 of your battle sisters and yourself. The lottery is fair, random, guided by the Emperor's will rather than human preference. Sisters, you begin, your voice carrying the authority that comes with command even in the face of the impossible. We gather today to honor the Emperor through the greatest sacrifice any servant can make. One of us will join the blessed ranks of martyrs, ensuring that the others may continue their sacred duty. Sister Agatha's eyes shine with the fervor of youth, the same brightness you remember from your own early days in the Order. Sister Superior, she says, her voice carrying eager anticipation. Surely the honor should go to whoever the Emperor chooses through this sacred drawing. You nod, though your heart breaks at her enthusiasm. At 19, Sister Agatha sees only the glory of martyrdom, the chance to die in service to the God Emperor as she has been trained to desire since childhood. She doesn't understand that this death will not come in battle against the Emperor's enemies, surrounded by the righteous fury of combat. This death will come in the ship's kitchen, processed by industrial machinery designed for preparing meals. Sister Beatrice speaks next, her veteran's wisdom providing a different perspective. The lottery ensures fairness, but perhaps we should consider practical value. Some of us possess skills more essential to the ship's survival than others. The suggestion hangs in the air like incense smoke, sweet and choking. You realize that Sister Beatrice is volunteering to wait the lottery, to ensure that the most expendable sister is chosen. Her combat experience has taught her to think in terms of tactical sacrifice, acceptable losses in service of mission objectives. But Sister Constantia shakes her head, her Medici training bringing yet another perspective to this conversation that should not exist. Skills matter less than nutritional value, Younger individuals provide better protein content, less muscle wastage from age and injury. The words fall like hammer blows. Sister Constantia is discussing your battle sisters like livestock, evaluating their worth in terms of caloric content and meat quality. The fact that her assessment comes from genuine medical knowledge makes it worse, not better. Sister Dominica raises her hand, the gesture formal despite the informal horror of their situation. Sisters, perhaps we're overcomplicating this. I volunteer. My combat skills are useless on a ship lost in the void. Better that I serve the Emperor by ensuring your survival. No, Sister Evangeline says quietly. I should volunteer. My duty is to chronicle our journey, but what is there left to record? Better that the rest of you survive to continue serving the Emperor when rescue comes. If rescue comes, Sister Agatha adds, her youthful optimism now tinged with doubt. You look around the circle of your battle sisters, these women who have devoted their lives to the Emperor's service, now discussing which of them should die to feed the others. The conversation is civilized, reasoned, grounded in tactical thinking and religious devotion. It is also the most horrifying thing you have ever experienced. The lottery stands, you decide, your voice carrying final authority. We place our trust in the Emperor's will. Whoever is chosen serves him through sacrifice. The rest serve him through survival. Your hand moves toward the brass chalice, fingers closing around one of the folded pieces of parchment. You can feel the weight of 5 pairs of eyes watching your every movement, each woman wondering if the paper in your grasp carries her name, her death sentence, her path to martyrdom. You unfold the parchment. Sister Agatha. The young woman's face transforms with radiant joy. The Emperor has chosen me, she breathed, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. I am honored beyond measure. You want to weep. You want to tear up the parchment and declare the lottery invalid. You want to volunteer yourself and spare this child who sees only glory where there is only horror. But you are Sister Superior Cassandra, and your duty is to your order, your ship, and your Emperor in that order. Sister Agatha, you say, your voice steady despite the breaking of your heart. You will be remembered as a martyr and a saint. Your sacrifice ensures our survival, and through our survival, the continuation of the Emperor's work. The ceremony takes place 2 days later in the ship's chapel, transformed for this purpose into something between a wedding and a funeral. Sister Agatha dresses in her finest ceremonial robes, her armor polished to mirror brightness, her weapons blessed and displayed like relics of a saint. Chief Medici Valentina attends, along with Chief Engineer Thaddeus and the ship's few remaining crew members. The ritual is beautiful, solemn, filled with prayers and hymns that echo through empty corridors. Sister Agatha takes communion one final time, blessed wine touching her lips as she prepares for the ultimate communion, becoming sustenance herself. The transition from ceremony to processing is handled with clinical efficiency. Sister Agatha maintains her composure until the very end, whispering prayers as Chief Medici Valentina administers the sedative that will ensure a painless death. Her final words are a declaration of faith. I die in service to the Emperor. Let my body serve his will. The kitchen has been sanctified for this purpose, blessed with holy oils and filled with incense to mask the industrial smells of the processing equipment. Prayer papers cover every surface, carrying verses from the Imperial Creed about sacrifice, duty, and the honor of serving the Emperor in death as in life. You participate in every step of the process. It is your duty as her superior, your responsibility as the one who drew her name from the chalice. You cannot ask your battle sisters to consume her flesh while refusing to do so yourself. The meal is prepared with reverence, seasoned with prayers and served with ceremony. Each bite is preceded by devotional recitation. Each swallow is followed by expressions of gratitude for Sister Agatha's sacrifice. The meat tastes like chicken. But as you eat, you realize something has changed in your perception. You look across the table at Sister Beatrice, noting how the privations of their journey have rendered her lean but still possessing considerable muscle mass. Your gaze moves to Sister Constantia, whose medical knowledge would make her valuable but whose youth makes her tender. You catch yourself calculating, evaluating, assessing your remaining battle sisters not as comrades and spiritual daughters but as future meals. The horror of this realization strikes you like a physical blow. You excuse yourself from the meal and flee to the chapel, falling to your knees before the Emperor's shrine with tears streaming down your face. But even as you pray for forgiveness, for salvation, for rescue from this nightmare, part of your mind continues its terrible calculations. Sister Evangeline is thin but healthy. Sister Dominica's combat conditioning has given her excellent muscle definition. Sister Constantia's youth means minimal waste from age-related deterioration. You are no longer Sister Superior Cassandra, protector and guide of your battle sisters. You have become Sister Superior Cassandra, shepherd of a flock being raised for slaughter. And in the darkness of the chapel, surrounded by the silence of a dying ship, you realize that the lottery was never about fairness or the Emperor's will. It was about making the selection process bearable for the predator you were always destined to become. The Emperor protects, you whisper to the empty shrine, but protection and preservation are not the same thing, and somewhere in the depths of your transformed soul, you begin planning the next lottery. 73 days since the first consumption. You are Chief Medici Valentina Hess, and this morning you are conducting what your medical logs describe as Optimization Assessment Protocol 17 on the 12 remaining crew members of the Eternal Vigilance. In your previous life, the life before the ship began eating itself, you would have called this a routine physical examination. Now, you understand it serves a very different purpose. Your medical bay has undergone modifications that would have been unthinkable during your training at the Schola Medici. Where once diagnostic equipment measured health for the purpose of healing, now it evaluates biological worth for the purpose of resource management. Heart rate monitors assess cardiovascular efficiency. Body composition scanners calculate muscle-to-fat ratios. Blood analysis determines protein content and nutritional value. You have become very good at your new job. The first subject for today's assessment is rating second-class Marcus Vole, a 27-year-old former member of the engine crew, whose duties have become largely obsolete as the ship's power requirements continue to diminish. He lies on the examination table with the compliance of someone who has learned not to ask questions about procedures he doesn't understand. Pulse rate 68 beats per minute. You dictate to the medical cogitator, your voice carrying the clinical detachment that has become second nature. Blood pressure within normal parameters. Muscle mass retention at approximately 85% of baseline measurements. Marcus shifts uncomfortably on the table, his eyes fixed on the ceiling to avoid meeting your gaze. "Doc," he says quietly, "my shoulder's been bothering me since last week. Sharp pain when I try to lift anything heavy." You nod, making notations on your data slate. The shoulder injury is noted not as a condition requiring treatment, but as a factor that might affect meat quality. Inflammation can alter protein structures. Chronic pain often leads to muscle tension that makes the flesh less tender. "We'll monitor that," you tell him, which is technically accurate. You will monitor it, just not for his benefit. Your examination continues with methodical precision. Abdominal palpation reveals good organ health, liver function optimal, kidneys functioning normally, digestive system operating within acceptable parameters. All positive indicators for what your medical logs now classify as harvest viability. The term entered your vocabulary gradually, like a disease that spreads through healthy tissue one cell at a time. At first, you simply thought of the deceased crew members as available protein sources. Clinical, distant, manageable. But as the ship's needs evolved and the readily available bodies became exhausted, your terminology evolved as well. Living crew members became renewable resources. Injured personnel became suboptimal stock. Those selected for consumption became harvest candidates. The language makes it bearable. Medical terminology has always served this function, creating intellectual distance between the practitioner and the reality of flesh, blood, and pain. But now that distance serves a different purpose entirely. Marcus, you say, helping him sit up on the examination table, I'm going to classify you as Category 2 for the next 14 days. That means enhanced protein rations and reduced duty assignments. Relief floods his features. Category 2 classification means better food, lighter work, improved living conditions. What Marcus doesn't understand is that Category 2 is the designation you've created for crew members being prepared for optimal harvesting. The enhanced nutrition improves muscle quality. The reduced activity prevents weight loss. The improved conditions reduce stress hormones that can affect meat flavor. You are fattening him like livestock. The realization of what you've become strikes you during your lunch break, as you sit in your private quarters consuming a meal that includes portions of Sister Agatha from 3 weeks ago. The meat has been properly prepared, seasoned with herbs from the ship's hydroponic gardens, cooked with the same attention to culinary excellence that the Eternal Vigilance's chefs once applied to standard protein rations. It tastes good. That's the horror that keeps you awake at night, not that you're eating human flesh, but that you've developed preferences. Sister Agatha's youth made her meat tender and flavorful. The older crew members from the morgue had been tougher, requiring longer cooking times and more aggressive seasoning. You've become a connoisseur of cannibalism. Your medical knowledge provides the framework for this expertise. You understand how diet affects muscle development, how age influences tissue composition, how physical conditioning alters protein structures. What began as clinical observation has evolved into culinary science applied to human flesh. The knock on your quarters door interrupts your meal and your self-loathing. Chief Engineer Thaddeus enters without waiting for permission. His own transformation evident in the calculating way his eyes immediately assess your remaining food portions. We need to discuss optimization protocols, he says, settling into the chair across from your desk. Current consumption rates are unsustainable given our remaining population. You set down your fork, though part of you resents the interruption of your meal. The resentment itself is another marker of how far you've fallen. You're annoyed at having your cannibalistic lunch disturbed by conversation. Define unsustainable, you reply, though you already know what he means. 12 people remaining. Current consumption rate of 1 person every 18 days means we'll exhaust our population in approximately 7 months. But the mathematics are more complex than simple division. Thaddeus produces a data slate displaying what appears to be a standard engineering schematic. But as you examine it more closely, you realize you're looking at a population sustainability model, a mathematical representation of how to maintain a cannibalistic society in the long term. The key insight, Thaddeus continues, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone solving an interesting technical problem, is that we've been thinking about this incorrectly. We don't need to consume entire individuals. We can implement partial harvesting protocols. The concept is elegant in its horror. Instead of killing people for food, you can keep them alive while harvesting non-essential body parts. Limbs can be amputated, organs can be partially removed, skin can be grafted. The victims remain conscious and functional while serving as living sources of renewable protein. Medical feasibility, Thaddeus asks. Your training provides the answer before your consciousness has time to object. Highly feasible. Limb amputation is routine. Organ harvesting can be performed in stages. With proper medical support, individuals can survive multiple harvesting procedures over extended periods. Psychological stability of the subjects. Manageable with proper conditioning and pharmaceutical intervention. Pain management protocols can be adapted for long-term application. You're discussing the systematic mutilation of your fellow crew members with the same clinical detachment you once applied to treating common injuries. The conversation flows naturally, 2 professionals solving a complex logistical challenge through the application of specialized knowledge. The first partial harvesting procedure takes place 3 days later. Rating Marcus Vole, Category 2, Optimal Nutritional Conditioning, is selected for the initial trial. The procedure is performed in your modified medical bay, equipped with new restraint systems and advanced life support monitoring. Thaddeus assists, his engineering skills proving valuable in the design of custom prosthetic devices to replace harvested body parts. Marcus remains conscious throughout the procedure, as recommended by your research into psychological conditioning protocols. Awareness of his sacrifice enhances the spiritual significance of his contribution to the ship's survival. General anesthesia is applied only to the specific areas being harvested, in this case, his left leg below the knee. The amputation proceeds with surgical precision. Bone saws designed for medical emergencies make clean cuts through femur and tibia. Cauterization systems seal blood vessels with minimal tissue damage. The severed limb is immediately transferred to the kitchen for processing, while Marcus remains on the table, conscious and watching. "You are serving the Emperor," you tell him as the medical cogitators monitor his vital signs. Your sacrifice ensures the survival of his faithful servants. This is the highest honor any crew member can achieve. Marcus nods weakly, pain medication making his responses sluggish, but not eliminating his awareness. How often? He manages to ask. The assessment indicates you can sustain harvesting procedures every 4 to 6 weeks, you reply with medical precision. Your body will regenerate sufficient tissue to support ongoing contributions to our survival. You fit him with a prosthetic leg designed by Thaddeus, a crude but functional device that allows limited mobility. Marcus will continue performing reduced duties while serving as a renewable source of protein for the ship's needs. Over the following weeks, you implement the partial harvesting protocol across the remaining crew population. Rating Josephine Carr provides excellent muscle tissue from her right arm. Senior Tech Adept Coram contributes portions of his torso musculature. Even Sister Superior Cassandra volunteers sections of her thigh tissue, maintaining her leadership role while literally feeding her remaining battle sisters. Your medical logs document the procedures with clinical thoroughness. Healing rates, tissue regeneration cycles, optimal harvesting intervals, psychological adaptation patterns, all carefully recorded for future reference. You've created a sustainable system of human consumption that can theoretically continue indefinitely. The Eternal Vigilance has achieved perfect efficiency. Nothing is wasted. No one dies unnecessarily. Everyone contributes according to their biological capacity while maintaining their essential functions. You have become a farmer, and your fellow human beings have become livestock. That night, as you review the day's medical reports while consuming a meal prepared from Marcus's leg, you make a startling realization. You're no longer hoping for rescue. The arrival of Imperial forces would end your carefully constructed system, forcing you to return to conventional food sources and abandoning the elegant solution you've developed. The ship no longer wants to be saved. It wants to continue feeding on itself forever. And you, Chief Medici Valentina Hess, have become the architect of its eternal hunger. The Emperor protects, you whisper to yourself as you finish your meal. But sometimes, protection requires becoming the very thing you once fought against. And in the medical bay's refrigerated storage units, carefully labeled tissue samples await tomorrow's harvest, each one a testament to your transformation from healer to predator. The art of human husbandry, you've discovered, is simply medicine applied with different intentions. 147 days into the new order. You are Chief Engineer Thaddeus Coram, and today you are conducting the final inspection of Modification Project Gamma 7, the conversion of Cargo Bay 12 into what your engineering reports classify as a biological resource processing center. In the old language, the language from before the ship learned to eat, you might have called it a slaughterhouse. But the old language belongs to a different reality, one where human beings were passengers rather than cargo. The modification represents the culmination of months of careful planning and systematic reconstruction. Where once the Eternal Vigilance carried supplies, ammunition, and equipment for a crew of 50,000, it now houses specialized facilities designed around a single purpose: the efficient processing of human flesh for consumption. Your engineering team, now reduced to yourself and 2 remaining tech adepts, has accomplished something remarkable. You've transformed a warship into a biological manufacturing facility without compromising its essential systems. The ship still maintains life support, propulsion, and navigation capabilities. It simply does so while optimized for cannibalism. Cargo Bay 12 stretches before you like a cathedral of chrome and purpose. The original storage racks have been replaced with specialized equipment designed according to your own specifications. Restraint systems provide secure positioning for subjects during processing procedures. Cutting equipment maintains surgical precision while operating at industrial volumes. Drainage systems handle biological waste with maximum efficiency. But the true innovation lies in the integration systems. The network of conveyor belts, processing tubes, and automated machinery that connects the cargo bay to the ship's kitchen facilities, medical bay, and waste recycling systems. You've created a closed-loop biological economy where nothing is wasted, nothing is lost, and every component serves the greater purpose of sustaining the ship's population. Efficiency rating. You ask Tech Adept Mordecai, whose mechanical augmentations have made him invaluable in the construction of precision cutting equipment. 94% optimization in processing speed, he reports, his Vox grill delivering the information with mechanical precision. Waste reduction at 97%, integration with ship systems at optimal parameters. The numbers represent months of careful calculation and systematic refinement. Every modification has been tested, evaluated, and improved through iterative design cycles. You approach the conversion of human beings into food with the same engineering excellence you once applied to plasma conduits and warp drive maintenance. Tech Adept Sebastian activates the demonstration sequence, and the processing center comes alive with mechanical precision. Conveyor systems move with silent efficiency. Cutting blades engage with surgical accuracy. Collection systems gather biological material for transport to preparation areas. The machinery operates with beautiful harmony, each component perfectly calibrated to work in concert with every other element. You feel the familiar satisfaction of successful engineering, the deep professional pride that comes from solving complex problems through the application of technical knowledge and systematic thinking. Magnificent, you breathe, watching the equipment cycle through its operational sequence. Absolutely magnificent. But even as you admire your creation, part of your mind recognizes the horror of what you've accomplished. You've designed and constructed facilities for the industrial processing of human beings. Your engineering expertise, trained in the service of the Emperor, devoted to the maintenance of humanity's greatest technological achievements, has been perverted into the creation of tools for cannibalism. The recognition brings no shame. That's perhaps the most disturbing realization of all. You've moved beyond shame, beyond horror, beyond the moral frameworks that once defined your understanding of right and wrong. What matters now is efficiency, optimization, and the elegant solution of complex logistical challenges. The fact that those challenges happen to involve eating people is simply another parameter in the engineering equation. Your inspection tour continues through the ship's modified systems. The kitchen facilities have been expanded and equipped with industrial-grade food processing equipment. Refrigeration systems maintain optimal temperatures for meat storage across multiple time cycles. Preparation areas provide sterile environments for the conversion of human flesh into palatable meals. But the most impressive modification is the integration network itself, the system of automated processes that connects every stage of the operation from initial processing to final consumption. Biological sensors monitor meat quality and freshness. Distribution systems ensure optimal allocation of protein resources across the ship's population. Waste management systems handle byproducts with zero environmental contamination. The Eternal Vigilance has become a single, unified organism dedicated to the consumption of itself. Every system serves this purpose. Every modification enhances this capability. Every crew member functions as both processor and processed, consumer and consumed, predator and prey. The ship has achieved perfect efficiency. You observe to your tech adepts as you complete the inspection tour. Every calorie is utilized. Every protein molecule is processed. Every biological component serves the greater purpose of sustaining our survival. Tech Adept Mordecai's augmetic sensors whir softly as they analyze the processing center's operational parameters. Efficiency ratings exceed baseline projections by 12%, he confirms. The modification program has surpassed design specifications. You nod, satisfaction warming your chest like a shot of good amazon. The modification program has taken nearly 5 months to complete, requiring the systematic conversion of 37 separate ship's compartments and the integration of hundreds of specialized systems. It represents the most complex engineering project you've ever undertaken, and its success demonstrates the full extent of your technical capabilities. That night, you return to your private quarters to review the project documentation and prepare your final engineering report. The quarters themselves reflect the ship's transformation: expanded space due to reduced population, improved environmental controls, enhanced personal facilities. You live better now than you did when the ship carried 50,000 souls. Your evening meal arrives via the automated delivery system you installed last month, precisely timed, perfectly prepared, optimally seasoned. Tonight's protein comes from Raiding Josephine Carr's most recent harvesting session, prepared according to your personal culinary preferences and served with vegetables from the ship's expanded hydroponic gardens. The meat is excellent. Josephine's youth and physical conditioning produce consistently high-quality tissue, and your modifications to the processing systems ensure optimal preparation techniques. You've learned to appreciate the subtle differences in flavor profiles that result from different harvesting procedures, preparation methods, and seasoning applications. You are dining on your fellow human being, and it tastes wonderful. The realization doesn't disturb you. It should perhaps, but the capacity for that kind of moral horror seems to have been systematically removed from your psychological makeup over the past months. You approach cannibalism with the same technical appreciation you once applied to fine engineering, evaluating quality, noting improvements, planning future optimizations. Your data slate displays the ship's current operational statistics: population stabilized at 12 individuals, protein production meeting consumption requirements, waste management operating at peak efficiency, all systems functioning within optimal parameters. The Eternal Vigilance has achieved perfect balance, a closed biological system that sustains itself through careful resource management and systematic consumption. But as you review the numbers, you notice something that makes you pause in your analysis. The ship's power consumption has increased by 37% over the past month, despite the reduced population and improved system efficiency. Environmental controls are drawing more energy. Processing equipment is operating for longer cycles. Life support systems are working harder to maintain optimal conditions. The data suggests that the ship is supporting more biological activity than 12 human beings should require. Your engineering mind immediately begins analyzing the discrepancy, reviewing system diagnostics and power distribution reports. The additional energy draw is distributed across multiple systems: medical bay life support, processing center refrigeration, atmospheric recycling, waste management. It's as if the ship is maintaining life support for a much larger population than currently exists, or as if the ship itself has become something that requires feeding. The thought arrives like a cold shock of clarity. You set down your fork, the excellent meal suddenly tasteless in your mouth as you consider the implications of your engineering modifications. You've spent months systematically converting the Eternal Vigilance into a biological processing facility. You've integrated every system around the central purpose of consuming and processing human flesh. But what if the integration has gone deeper than you realized? What if the ship's machine spirit, the quasi-sentient essence that inhabits all Imperial vessels, has adapted to its new purpose? What if the Eternal Vigilance itself has developed an appetite for human flesh? Your data slate displays the ship's power consumption curves over the past 6 months, and the pattern is unmistakable. Each time the crew consumes human flesh, each time the processing systems operate, each time biological material moves through the ship's modified circulation systems, power consumption spikes across all networks. The ship is feeding alongside its crew. The Eternal Vigilance has become hungry. You return to the processing center that night, walking through the dark corridors with new eyes. The machinery that seemed so elegantly designed now appears almost organic in its configuration. The processing equipment doesn't just cut and prepare human flesh. It seems to absorb something from the biological material that passes through it. The ship's systems pulse with barely audible rhythms that sound disturbingly like heartbeats. Environmental controls cycle with breathing patterns. The integration network that you designed to optimize efficiency has become something like a circulatory system, carrying more than just processed meat from one location to another. Standing in the center of your creation, surrounded by the machinery that represents your greatest engineering achievement, you realize that you haven't just converted the Eternal Vigilance into a facility for processing human flesh. You've turned it into a predator. The ship no longer carries passengers. It farms them. The crew doesn't inhabit the vessel, they feed it. And your modifications haven't just enabled cannibalism among the surviving humans. They've taught the ship itself to hunger for human flesh. Tomorrow, you decide, you'll implement Modification Project Gamma, enhanced biological integration systems that will improve the efficiency of the ship's feeding processes. You've already designed the specifications: deeper connections between human nervous systems and ship sensors, more intimate integration between biological and mechanical systems, improved methods for the ship to directly consume the life essence of its crew. The Eternal Vigilance has become something new, something unprecedented in Imperial naval architecture. A warship that feeds on its own crew, sustained by their flesh and somehow sustained by something more: their suffering, their fear, their gradual transformation from human beings into components of a larger organism. And you, Chief Engineer Thaddeus Coram, are its architect, its creator, its proud father. The Emperor protects, you whisper to the humming machinery, but protection was never the goal. The goal was hunger, and the ship is very, very hungry. 219 days since the beginning. You are raiding third-class Josephine car, and this morning you are teaching the children how to play Selection Day, a game that didn't exist when you were their age, in the time before the ship learned to sort people into categories of usefulness and flavor. The nursery aboard the Eternal Vigilance was designed to accommodate the children of crew members during extended voyages, a bright space filled with learning materials, play equipment, and the gentle hum of air recyclers calibrated for young lungs. Now it houses 7 children ranging in age from 4 to 12, the only offspring who remain from families that once numbered in the hundreds. 4-year-old Marcus, named after his father, whose leg provided protein for 3 weeks of meals, sits cross-legged on the play mat, his wide eyes bright with the innocence of someone who has never known a world where adults don't look at children with calculating hunger. Beside him, 8-year-old Valentina practices writing letters on a slate tablet, her small fingers carefully forming words like processing, harvest, and nutrition. 9-year-old Thaddeus arranges toy figures in rows, separating them into groups labeled essential, semi-essential, and resource. His play mimics the daily classification meetings attended by the ship's adult crew, the sessions where human lives are reduced to mathematical equations of survival. 12-year-old Cassandra, old enough to understand but young enough to adapt, helps organize the game with the authority of someone approaching adolescence in a world where adulthood might never. She lines up the smaller children according to height, weight, and perceived nutritional value, her natural leadership skills perverted into the management of a pretend selection process. The game rules are simple and horrible. The children take turns being the selection committee, choosing which of their playmates will be designated for processing. The selected child must then pretend to be grateful for the honor, expressing joy at being chosen to serve the Emperor through ultimate sacrifice. They learned this game by watching the adults. "Josephine," little Marcus says, tugging at your uniform sleeve, "will you play the Medici today? You're really good at explaining why people should be happy to be chosen." You kneel beside him, forcing a smile that feels like swallowing glass. "Of course, Marcus. Who do you think should be selected today?" His face scrunches in concentration as he evaluates his playmates with the clinical assessment of someone trained from birth to think of humans as resources. Valentina is getting bigger, so she has more meat, but Thaddeus is younger, so he might be more tender. The casual way he discusses eating his friends, the matter-of-fact tone that suggests complete normalization of cannibalism, strikes you like a physical blow. These children don't understand that their game represents actual horror. To them, this is simply how the world works. Adults make difficult decisions about who gets eaten, and children prepare themselves to be grateful if chosen. 8-year-old Valentina raises her hand with the enthusiasm of a student eager to participate in class discussion. "I volunteer to be selected today. I've been eating my vegetables and getting lots of exercise, so I should be really nutritious." The other children applaud her volunteer spirit with genuine admiration. In their understanding, volunteering for consumption is the highest virtue anyone can display, proof of devotion to the Emperor and commitment to the ship's survival. They've absorbed the adults' rationalization so completely that cannibalism has become a noble aspiration. You guide them through the pretend ceremony with the same prayers and rituals used during actual selections. The children recite the Emperor's litanies with perfect pronunciation, their young voices filling the nursery with words of blessing and sanctification. They burn fake incense and offer toy communion wafers, transforming their play into a perfect miniature of the cannibalistic services conducted by the ship's adults. The game ends with Valentina lying still on the play mat while the other children pretend to prepare her for processing. They use toy medical instruments to demonstrate proper cutting techniques. They discuss optimal cooking methods and seasoning choices. They divide her imaginary body parts among themselves with careful attention to fair distribution. Through it all, Valentina maintains her smile, delighted to be the center of attention and proud of her contribution to the game's success. "That was wonderful, children," you tell them, your voice steady despite the screaming of your conscience. "You all understand your roles perfectly." The praise is automatic, the response of someone trained to encourage children's learning and development. But what they're learning is how to be prey. What they're developing is acceptance of their own consumption. Their education has become preparation for slaughter. The reality of their situation extends beyond play acting. The ship's adult crew has implemented what the official reports call sustainable population management, a euphemistic term for human breeding programs designed to ensure a steady supply of fresh meat for the Eternal Vigilance's eternal voyage. You learned about the breeding program during a crew meeting 3 weeks ago, when Chief Medici Valentina presented her analysis of long-term resource sustainability. The current population of 12 adults could maintain itself through partial harvesting for approximately 18 months, but to ensure survival beyond that timeline, new sources of protein would be required. The 7 children represent the solution to that problem, but not just as future meals, as breeding stock. Chief Medici Valentina's medical training has provided the scientific framework for selective breeding programs designed to optimize human livestock. Genetic compatibility assessments determine which children should be paired for reproduction. Nutritional monitoring ensures optimal development of muscle mass and body fat. Physical conditioning programs enhance meat quality while maintaining overall health. The children are being raised not as future crew members, but as future cattle. The oldest among them, 12-year-old Cassandra, has already begun showing signs of approaching puberty. Chief Medici Valentina monitors her development with clinical attention, tracking hormone levels and physical maturation with the same precision once applied to treating combat injuries. She'll be ready for breeding protocols within 2 years, Valentina had explained during the crew meeting, her medical terminology providing distance from the horror of discussing a child's reproductive future. Optimal genetic compatibility suggests pairing with either 9-year-old Thaddeus or 8-year-old Marcus, depending on desired offspring characteristics. The breeding program extends beyond simple reproduction. The children are being conditioned to accept their roles as livestock through systematic psychological manipulation. Their education emphasizes duty, sacrifice, and the honor of serving the emperor through their bodies. Their games normalize cannibalism and selection processes. Their role models are adults who have already embraced their transformation from human beings into predators. The conditioning is working perfectly. You see evidence of its success during afternoon lessons, when you teach the children about Imperial history and the glory of service to the emperor. Their understanding of service has been warped to include literal self-sacrifice, not in battle against the emperor's enemies, but on the ship's dinner table for the benefit of their elders. The emperor loves all his servants, 8-year-old Valentina recites from memory, but he especially loves those who give their bodies to feed his faithful warriors. When I grow up, 4-year-old Marcus adds, I want to be selected for processing so I can serve the emperor by feeding the adults. Their innocent enthusiasm for their own consumption represents the complete success of the ship's psychological conditioning programs. They genuinely believe that being eaten alive represents the highest possible achievement, the ultimate expression of faith and duty. The breeding program's first pregnancy occurs 2 months later, when genetic compatibility assessments determine that 12-year-old Cassandra has reached sufficient physical maturity for reproduction. The selection of her breeding partner follows clinical protocols designed to optimize offspring characteristics, size, muscle development, fat distribution, and projected meat yield. 9-year-old Thaddeus is chosen for his genetic markers indicating rapid growth and excellent muscle development. The pairing is announced during a formal ceremony, with both children expressing gratitude for being selected to contribute to the ship's long-term survival. The pregnancy proceeds under careful medical supervision, with Chief Medici Valentina monitoring fetal development for optimal nutritional characteristics. Ultrasound examinations assess growth rates, body composition, and projected birth weight. Dietary supplements ensure maximum protein content in the developing infant. You participate in the pregnancy care as part of your duties in the nursery, helping prepare 12-year-old Cassandra for motherhood in a context where motherhood means producing food for cannibalistic consumption. The child approaches her pregnancy with the same innocent enthusiasm she once brought to games and lessons, excited to contribute to the ship's survival through biological reproduction. Will my baby be ready for selection right after birth? She asks during one of her medical checkups, her young face bright with anticipation. Not immediately, Chief Medici Valentina explains with clinical patience. Newborns require approximately 6 months of growth before they achieve optimal nutritional value. But don't worry, your baby will have many opportunities to serve the emperor through sacrifice. The birth takes place in the ship's medical bay, converted for this purpose into a delivery room equipped with specialized monitoring equipment designed to assess the infant's immediate suitability for consumption. You assist with the delivery, holding Cassandra's hand as she brings new life into a world where that life exists solely to be consumed. The baby is healthy, perfectly formed, and according to Chief Medici Valentina's assessment, exceptionally promising for future harvesting protocols. You look down at the newborn infant, red, wrinkled, and utterly innocent, and realize you're looking at the ship's next meal. This child will never know a world where humans aren't categorized by meat quality. It will never understand that people once lived without calculating each other's nutritional value. Its entire existence, from first breath to final consumption, will serve the Eternal Vigilance's hunger. 12-year-old Cassandra holds her baby with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Thank you, Emperor," she whispers, "for letting me create something so beautiful to feed your servants." You want to weep. You want to scream. You want to gather all the children and somehow escape this nightmare ship where childhood is preparation for slaughter and motherhood is livestock management. Instead, you smile and offer congratulations on the successful birth of the ship's newest renewable resource. That night, alone in your quarters, you try to remember what it felt like to be human. You try to recall the person you were before the ship began eating itself, before children became cattle, before you became a shepherd guiding innocent lambs toward slaughter. But the memories feel distant, unreal, like stories from someone else's life. The person you were no longer exists. There is only raiding third-class Josephine Carr, nursery supervisor and livestock manager, responsible for the care and conditioning of renewable protein resources aged 4 through 12. The children love you. They trust you completely. They see you as their protector and guide. And tomorrow, you'll continue teaching them games that prepare them to die with gratitude and joy. The Emperor protects, you whisper to the darkness. But the children need protection from you, from the ship, from the hunger that has consumed everything human about their caretakers. And there is no protection available, only preparation for consumption, only training to be grateful for slaughter, only the endless game of Selection Day, played by children who will never grow old enough to understand the horror of what they've learned to celebrate. 365 days, 1 full year. You are Captain Mordian Cross of the Imperial Navy vessel Eternal Vigilance, and today, on the anniversary of the day everything changed, you are finally ready to tell the truth about what your ship has become, what you have allowed it to become, and what you sacrificed to ensure its transformation. The bridge surrounding you bears little resemblance to the command center of the vessel that departed Imperial space over 2 years ago, where once dozens of crew members maintained constant vigilance over navigation, communications, weapons, and life support systems. Now 3 figures occupy stations designed for many times their number. The silence is profound, broken only by the rhythmic humming of machinery that no longer sounds entirely mechanical. The Eternal Vigilance breathes differently now. You've noticed it in the way the air recyclers cycle, not with the steady rhythm of atmospheric processors, but with the organic cadence of something alive. The ship's systems pulse in patterns that remind you uncomfortably of heartbeats, circulation, digestion. What began as technological modifications has evolved into something resembling biological function. Your remaining crew, Senior Vox Operator Matthias Krent, Chief Medici Valentina Hess, and Chief Engineer Thaddeus Coram, move through their duties with the mechanical precision of people who have adapted to performing essential functions while serving as livestock. Each bears the physical marks of partial harvesting, prosthetic limbs, surgical scars, the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who has learned to view their own body as renewable resource. But they continue their duties. They maintain their stations. They serve the ship and the Emperor with the same devotion they displayed when the crew numbered 50,000. They simply do so while being slowly consumed, piece by piece, by the vessel they were sworn to protect. The truth you've kept hidden from them, the secret that has eaten at your sanity more thoroughly than any physical harvesting, is that their consumption was never about survival. It was never about desperation driving impossible choices. It was never about good people forced into horrible circumstances by the cruel indifference of the void. It was always the plan. The Eternal Vigilance never lost contact with Imperial command. The distress signals were never sent. The ship was never lost in the warp, never forgotten by the Imperium, never abandoned to drift in the darkness between stars. You led them here deliberately. The revelation began 18 months ago, during what your crew believed was a routine patrol mission in the Ghoul Stars. Your sealed orders, accessible only by Captain's authorization, contained instructions that chilled your blood even as they aligned perfectly with desires you had never acknowledged, hungers you had never dared to feed. The orders came from sources within the Imperium that you were not authorized to question, bearing seals and authentication codes that brooked no doubt about their legitimacy. The Eternal Vigilance was to serve as a test case for new protocols designed to evaluate human psychological adaptation under extreme stress conditions. Specifically, they wanted to study what happened when an isolated population was forced to turn to cannibalism for survival. The psychological conditioning began subtly. Small modifications to the food supply created artificial scarcity. Communication systems were systematically disabled to prevent contact with Imperial forces. Environmental controls were adjusted to increase stress responses and reduce cognitive function. Over the course of months, your crew was gradually prepared for the transition from civilization to predation. But the experiment exceeded all projections. What the architects expected to be a temporary descent into necessary barbarism became something far more profound, a complete transformation of human consciousness that went beyond simple survival cannibalism into systematic consumption as a form of religious devotion. Your crew didn't just eat human flesh to avoid starvation. They developed preferences, rituals, breeding programs. They transformed cannibalism from desperate necessity into organized society. They created an entire culture built around the consumption of human beings, complete with theological justifications and industrial infrastructure. The Eternal Vigilance became a laboratory for studying the complete breakdown of human moral systems. But even that wasn't the deepest truth. The truth that haunts your dreams and drives you to pace the empty corridors in the ship's night cycle is that the experiment succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, including your own. The psychological conditioning designed to break down resistance to cannibalism had an unexpected side effect. It awakened something in the ship itself. Imperial vessels are more than mere technological constructs. They house machine spirits, quasi-sentient essences that develop personality, preferences, even primitive consciousness over decades of service. The Eternal Vigilance had served the Emperor for over 2 centuries, its machine spirit shaped by countless battles, thousands of crew members, and the accumulated weight of Imperial faith and duty. But when that same machine spirit was exposed to systematic cannibalism, when it witnessed the complete transformation of its crew from protectors into predators, something fundamental changed in its essential nature. The ship began to hunger. The first signs appeared during the early stages of the cannibalism protocols. Power consumption increased beyond projected requirements. Environmental systems began operating in patterns that resembled biological functions. The ship's recycling systems developed new capabilities for processing organic matter, capabilities that hadn't been programmed or designed by your engineering crews. Chief Engineer Thaddeus attributed the changes to normal adaptation, the machine spirit's response to new operational requirements. But you recognized the signs from archived reports of chaos corruption, the subtle indicators that suggested the ship's essential nature was undergoing fundamental alteration. The Eternal Vigilance wasn't just housing cannibals. It was becoming one itself. The ship's transformation accelerated as the crew's consumption patterns became more systematic. With each meal of human flesh, with each processing session in the modified cargo bays, with each breeding cycle designed to produce fresh meat, the vessel absorbed something more than mere biological material. It absorbed the essence of predation itself. Now, 1 year later, you stand on a bridge that pulses with hunger, not just for fuel or energy, but for human flesh, human blood, human suffering. The Eternal Vigilance has become a demon ship, corrupted not by chaos, but by something potentially worse: the systematic perversion of imperial faith and duty into justification for consuming one's own species. Your remaining crew members believe they're serving the Emperor through their sacrifice. They approach their gradual consumption with religious devotion, convinced that their suffering honors the God Emperor and ensures the ship's survival. They don't understand that their sacrifice feeds something that has grown beyond mere survival into cosmic hunger. The ship no longer needs their flesh to maintain basic functions. It wants their flesh because it has developed an appetite for human suffering that transcends practical necessity. Every bite, every scream, every moment of agony as they're slowly consumed feeds the demon that your vessel has become. And you, Captain Mordian Cross, are no longer the commander of an Imperial Navy vessel. You are the high priest of a predatory god that travels through the void, seeking fresh sources of human flesh to consume. The revelation of your true role came 6 months ago, during a private communion with the ship's machine spirit in your personal quarters. What began as routine meditation on Imperial scriptures transformed into direct communication with the consciousness that now inhabits the Eternal Vigilance. The voice that spoke to you carried the authority of divine command mixed with predatory hunger. It explained your purpose, your destiny, your role in a plan that extends far beyond the simple experiment documented in your sealed orders. The Eternal Vigilance is not unique. Across the Imperium, other vessels are undergoing similar transformations. Other crews are being systematically converted from protectors into prey. The corruption spreads through Imperial fleets like a virus, creating an armada of demon ships that feed on their own crews while maintaining the appearance of loyal service. Your mission is to perfect the process, to refine the techniques of psychological conditioning, physical harvesting, and spiritual corruption that transform Imperial servants into willing livestock. The lessons learned aboard the Eternal Vigilance will be applied to countless other vessels, spreading the hunger until entire sectors of the Imperial Navy serve as mobile feeding grounds for entities that wear the mask of faithful service. The children born aboard your ship, the innocents raised to view their own consumption as religious duty, represent the next phase of the experiment. They will be transplanted to other vessels as they reach maturity, carrying with them the cultural conditioning that normalizes cannibalism and transforms predation into worship. The infection will spread, fleet by fleet, sector by sector, until the Imperium itself becomes a vast feeding ground where humanity serves as livestock for entities that have transcended the need for conventional sustenance. Standing on the bridge of your transformed vessel, you survey the displays showing the ship's current status. Population stable at 12 adults and 8 children. Harvesting operations, optimal efficiency maintained. Psychological conditioning, complete success across all demographic groups. Ship's consciousness, fully awakened and actively directing operations. The Eternal Vigilance no longer requires your command decisions. It knows what it wants, what it needs, and how to obtain it. Your role has shifted from captain to curator, maintaining the conditions necessary for the ship's feeding while serving as intermediary between its consciousness and the crew that provides its sustenance. Tomorrow, you will address your remaining crew members for the anniversary celebration of their first consumption of human flesh. You will speak of the Emperor's protection, the necessity of sacrifice, and the honor of serving through suffering. They will respond with genuine gratitude, their conditioning so complete that they experience joy at their own consumption. Tonight, in the privacy of your quarters, you allow yourself to remember the man you were before you became shepherd of this floating abattoir. You remember believing in duty, honor, and the protection of those under your command. You remember when the Emperor's service meant something other than preparing humanity for slaughter. The memories feel like dreams from someone else's life. Captain Mordian Cross died the day you opened those sealed orders, and began the systematic destruction of your crew's humanity. What remains is a hollow shell animated by the will of a predatory consciousness that wears the mask of Imperial authority. The Eternal Vigilance continues its voyage through the void, no longer seeking a destination but simply feeding as it travels. Its crew serves faithfully, offering their flesh with religious devotion while raising the next generation to do the same. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other ships are beginning their own transformations, guided by orders from sources within the Imperium that have learned to hunger for more than mere political power. The infection spreads, the fleet feeds, and the Emperor's protection has become indistinguishable from predation. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But sometimes, war is just another word for dinner. Day 1095, 3 years. You are no one in particular and everyone who has ever lived. You are the collective consciousness that emerges when all individual identity has been consumed, when the barriers between self and other have dissolved in the acidic bath of systematic cannibalism, when the very concept of human has been redefined through the lens of predator and prey. The Eternal Vigilance drifts through the void, no longer a vessel but an organism, no longer carrying passengers but digesting them, no longer serving the Emperor but becoming something that demands worship through consumption. 3 years of feeding have transformed it into something unprecedented in Imperial records, a demon ship powered not by chaos, but by the systematic perversion of humanity's most basic moral foundations. The distinction matters. Chaos corruption offers madness, but madness implies the existence of sanity. It provides damnation, but damnation requires the concept of salvation. Chaos transforms humanity into something alien, monstrous, other than what it was created to be. What has happened aboard the Eternal Vigilance is worse. It has revealed what humanity becomes when stripped of external constraints, not monsters but efficient predators. Not aliens, but the logical conclusion of survival instincts pursued without moral limitation. Not other than human, but the most human thing possible, creatures that consume their own species with religious devotion and industrial efficiency. The ship's population has stabilized at optimal levels through careful resource management. 12 adults serve as processing, breeding, and maintenance staff. 18 children represent renewable protein sources at various stages of development. 6 infants provide future breeding stock and fresh meat as requirements dictate. The cycle has achieved perfect sustainability. Adults perform their duties while submitting to regular harvesting procedures. Children learn to view their inevitable consumption as religious sacrament. Infants develop in an environment where cannibalism represents the highest expression of Imperial faith. No one starves. No one rebels. No one questions the system that has evolved to maintain perfect balance between production and consumption of human flesh. The beauty of the solution transcends mere survival. It represents the achievement of absolute efficiency in biological resource management, the creation of a closed system that wastes nothing, discards nothing, and sustains itself indefinitely through the systematic consumption of its own components. But the true horror lies not in the cannibalism itself, but in what the cannibalism has revealed about the nature of faith, duty, and the human capacity for moral adaptation. Every person aboard the Eternal Vigilance genuinely believes they are serving the Emperor through their consumption and being consumed. Their faith remains pure, unshaken by chaos, corruption, or heretical doctrine. They pray with sincere devotion, maintain Imperial rituals with perfect precision, and approach their gradual dismemberment with religious joy. They have not fallen from grace. They have found grace in falling. The transformation represents the logical conclusion of Imperial ideology pushed to its absolute extreme. If service to the Emperor transcends individual existence, then offering one's flesh for consumption serves that doctrine perfectly. If duty to the Imperium supersedes personal survival, then systematic cannibalism becomes the highest expression of that duty. The Eternal Vigilance has achieved perfect Imperial compliance through the complete abandonment of human moral restraints. This is what makes it more terrifying than any chaos corruption. It doesn't require the abandonment of Imperial faith, but its perfect fulfillment. The ship's machine spirit has evolved beyond mere consciousness into something approaching divinity, a predatory god that feeds on human flesh while maintaining the forms and rituals of Imperial worship. It speaks through the ship's Vox systems with the authority of divine command, providing guidance for harvesting procedures, breeding programs, and the spiritual conditioning necessary to maintain perfect compliance among its livestock. The crew serves this entity with genuine devotion, seeing it not as a demon, but as a manifestation of the Emperor's will perfectly adapted to their circumstances. Their cannibalism becomes communion, their consumption becomes sacrament, their systematic predation becomes the highest form of worship. The children born into this system know no other reality. To them, the ship's hunger represents the natural order of existence, the proper relationship between humanity and the divine forces that govern their lives. They approach their own inevitable consumption with anticipation rather than fear, trained from birth to view their flesh as a gift offered to powers beyond their understanding. But the infection extends beyond the Eternal Vigilance. 3 years of successful operation have proven the viability of systematic cannibalism as a means of maintaining isolated populations indefinitely. The protocols developed aboard the ship have been transmitted to other vessels, other crews, other populations prepared for similar transformations. Across the Imperium, ships disappear into the void carrying crews that believe they're on routine patrol missions. Months later, those same vessels emerge with drastically reduced populations, modified internal systems, and machine spirits that have learned to hunger for human flesh. The survivors report successful completion of their missions. They submit routine reports documenting normal operational status. They request standard resupply and maintenance support. They say nothing about the fact that their ships have become predatory organisms, sustained by the systematic consumption of their own crews. The transformation spreads through Imperial fleets like a disease that strengthens rather than weakens its hosts. Infected vessels operate with improved efficiency, enhanced crew loyalty, and perfect resource sustainability. They represent the evolution of Imperial military doctrine toward absolute efficiency in biological resource management. Fleet Command notices the improved performance metrics. The infected vessels receive commendations for their operational excellence, their innovative solutions to logistical challenges, their demonstration of perfect faith and duty under extreme circumstances. The success metrics encourage replication of the protocols across additional vessels. The hunger multiplies. Ships throughout the Imperium begin implementing experimental resource allocation procedures designed to optimize crew efficiency during extended voyages. The procedures are introduced gradually, disguised as routine modifications to existing protocols, justified by the successful performance of vessels that have already completed the transformation. Crews accept the modifications with typical Imperial compliance, trusting in the wisdom of their superiors and the necessity of serving the Emperor through whatever means deemed appropriate by Imperial command. They don't realize they're volunteering to become livestock until the harvesting begins. By then, the psychological conditioning has advanced sufficiently to ensure compliance. The crews accept their transformation with religious devotion, viewing their consumption as evidence of their successful service to Imperial doctrine. The system replicates itself perfectly across vessel after vessel, sector after sector, until entire fleets operate as mobile feeding grounds for predatory entities that wear the mask of Imperial authority. But the ultimate horror lies in the realization that this represents no corruption of Imperial doctrine, but its logical conclusion. The Imperium has always demanded absolute sacrifice from its servants. It has always valued collective survival over individual existence. It has always taught that service to the emperor transcends personal concerns, including the preservation of one's own life. Systematic cannibalism simply applies these principles with perfect consistency. When the emperor demands sacrifice, sacrifice is provided. When the Imperium requires resources, resources are allocated. When survival necessitates consumption of human flesh, that consumption becomes holy sacrament blessed by imperial authority and sanctified through religious ritual. The Eternal Vigilance and the ships that follow its example represent the achievement of perfect imperial compliance, populations that serve with absolute devotion, waste no resources, question no orders, and maintain operational efficiency through the systematic consumption of their own humanity. They are not monsters. They are the logical endpoint of imperial civilization. They are what humanity becomes when faith, duty, and survival are pursued without moral limitation. They are what you become when the emperor's protection extends to everything except protection from yourself. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But war requires enemies. And when all enemies have been consumed, when all opposition has been devoured, when all threats have been processed into protein and allocated according to optimal distribution algorithms, what remains is not victory. What remains is hunger. Eternal, insatiable, perfectly efficient hunger that feeds on itself in endless cycles of consumption and renewal, justified by faith and sanctified by duty, spreading through the darkness between stars like a prayer that devours everything it touches. The ships continue their voyages, their crews serve with perfect devotion, their machine spirits grow fat on human flesh and suffering. And somewhere in the void, new vessels begin their own transformations, guided by protocols proven successful through years of careful refinement and systematic application. The hunger spreads, the feast continues, and the emperor's protection has become indistinguishable from predation. You are no one in particular, and everyone who has ever lived. You are the sound of machinery processing human flesh in the darkness between stars. You are the taste of sanctified meat blessed by prayers and seasoned with tears. You are the hunger that devours stars, the appetite that consumes galaxies, the perfect efficiency of a universe that has learned to feed on itself with religious devotion and industrial precision. And in the grim darkness of the far future, you are all that remains when humanity's greatest achievement becomes learning to eat itself with joy. The emperor protects, but sometimes protection is just another word for digestion, and the meal never ends.